Hold on here. Hello, welcome to Swamp School Live. I am Mark Seelinger with the Swamp School, and I want to welcome you to our program today. I definitely want to hear from you all about any environmental questions you might be having. That would be great. Today we've got a lot going on. There are a lot of regulatory shifts going on that are kind of interesting. We want to talk about that. A recent court decision that definitely affects the folks up in the Northeast. We've got some real world field conditions and data reliability problems that have come up. That's going to be an issue. And we're going to take a look at the job market as well. So if you've got any questions, definitely please call in. We did turn the phones on this time, so they will actually work. So please call in. The phone number is 919-297-2540, 297-2540. And we would definitely welcome you to do that. Before we get started, let me just flip over here. I want to just give a quick shout out to one of our friends. This is a special thank you to Kaze Japanese Steakhouse and Sushi Bar in Garner. And if you are not familiar with Kaze, I would highly recommend it. They're on East Timber Drive in Garner. They have been a great friend to the Swamp School. They have helped us out with a lot of different events and things, and we really want to help them for that. So we wanted to take a moment to recognize their kindness and say thank you. So definitely, if you want a great steak, Japanese sushi bar type and Japanese steak place, it is a great place to go. Now, if your business would like to support the Swamp School, and we would feature your site, whatever you want, actually, as a sponsor, we'd love to hear from you. So please reach out to us. And you can reach out through swampschool.org or just support@swampschool.org. Send us an email, and we'll be glad to talk to you. So with that, let me switch over to today's topic. So we're going to start out with the New York ruling. And again, if anybody is from that area, we'd love to hear from you. Again, 919-297-2540. We'd love to hear from you about if you have any experience. It was about not that long ago, pretty recently, basically April 8th, according to the folks up at New York. I just posted this from their website. You can see the Albany County Supreme Court issued a decision affecting the DEC freshwater wetlands regulations, and essentially they're in an issue with basically reviewing the program. And New York had some very special wetland programs. Basically, it's an example of what happens when states try to respond to a narrower federal wetlands landscape, and this is essentially what they had done, meaning they were trying to replace what what the Supreme Court in the Washington had knocked out. So the New York Superior Court knocked back the DEC's newer freshwater wetlands program, and it's kind of an important point because it's a procedural and legal problem, not necessarily proof that wetlands regulations is disappearing. And really what this came down to is that the state really didn't, I don't want to sound mean here, but the state really needed to do its homework. There were a lot of issues about some of the procedures that you need to deal with when you're filing for a wetlands permit, and basically defining a wetland is they had some general rules. The idea behind this was that they were trying to be more restrictive than the federal program, and I don't think there was an issue with that. As a matter of fact, a couple of years ago, they had actually proposed something like that and had moved it forward so that the state could basically regulate wetlands that would have otherwise not been regulated. And that's not the issue. The issue is that there are procedures, and this is a trend we have seen. We saw this over the many years with the Army Corps, with a lot of the reasons why they spent so much time with the Supreme Court was largely bypassing some of the rules that the Supreme Court was pushing, and essentially just not doing its work. One of my favorites, really, this is an interesting one where I'm working on a case on this, so it's directly related to this, was the Naval Waters Protection Rule. The issue there was that when the court in Arizona had basically vacated it, the problem was there weren't actually any defendants. So the EPA and the Army Corps, it was a different administration. It just showed how political some of this stuff can become. So there was a lot of problems that came out of that, and there's actually those problems persist today, and it's generally a real problem because a lot of times the clients don't necessarily understand all these nuances between one ruling and another ruling, and it is definitely an issue. So let me flip back I guess we're done with New York here. Fade back to me. So the idea basically is the New York ruling was largely a function of just doing some homework, and I think they'll be back. There's no reason why the state of New York can't have its own wetlands program. New Jersey had something similar many, many years ago, like 30 or 40, and they are now, it's going on 40 years. I can't believe that. It's going on 40 years. But they had a lot of cool stuff. So I do actually have a caller. So let me just grab a caller here. I have to figure out the technology on this stuff, and I will take the call. Hold on a second. I'm going to try this. We are still figuring this stuff out, so bear with me, and I will take it right now. So let me see how we did here. So George is coming in here, and hopefully this will pop up soon. So he's got a question about jurisdictional determinations and non-jurisdictional crossing state lines. So bear with me 1 second. And yeah, the techniques here are pretty cool. All right, hold on a second. Hello.
Hi, Mark. How you doing?
Good, George. How are you? Glad to hear from you.
All right. I have one question for you. Have a wetland that does not have a direct connection. The only question I have is the wetland is located in between two states. It's on the, basically it crosses over into one state, and then it's also located in another state. Does that wetland, by it crossing over the state boundary, is it now jurisdictional, even though it's not connected?
There is because you've got, there's in the exceptions of that, there was something along the lines, I'll have to pull out the exact citation, but there is a way that is not jurisdictional under the Waters of the United States rule. The main thing was that the kind of permanent water bodies that cross state lines were automatically jurisdictional, but those would be like rivers and lakes and things like that. The other wetlands had to still show that connection, that physical connection to those permanent water bodies. And in the, I'm not sure if it was in the exceptions, exemptions rather, or actually is another one, but they had a statement in the Waters, yes, the current ones anyway, the latest and greatest, that did have that as not automatically jurisdictional. In the Trump rules that we're still waiting to hear on, they are pretty clearly that probably would not be jurisdictional if it was just a wetland that wasn't connected to a basically relatively permanent water that's the waters of the United States.
Okay. All right. That answers my question then. So
can I ask what states?
All right, thanks.
Can I ask what states?
Yeah, South Carolina and North Carolina.
Okay, so neither of them really have any wetland rules to begin with, so you don't have really a state issue. All right, cool.
So I was like, okay, this follows this, but I am questioning between the two states, the boundary of the state now.
Sure. I'll take a quick dive in it. I'll see if I can find the citation, and I can always send that to you. But I'm pretty positive if you can argue that it's not connected to a downstream water, basically waters of the United States, you don't have the jurisdictional connection.
Okay. All right. Well, Thanks a lot, buddy. I appreciate it. Hope everything's going good.
Great. Well, appreciate you calling.
Yes, and I like this. It's interesting. I love talking shop, so this is great.
Cool. Yeah, well, that's what we're trying to get more people involved. We're waiting for our phones to ring off the wall, so we're hoping for that, but we'll see how it goes.
Yep. All right. I'll talk to you later, okay?
All right, thanks. All right, cool. That worked. All right, so that's exciting. We're able to get it to actually work. Let me switch over to our next topic, actually timely as it is, as what George had just did. So let me fade over to here. And we have an interesting thing. Don't get crazy. Well, you see, reason withdrawn. This is what's been driving everybody crazy. I get these emails almost, I'd say, at least every other day, if not daily, from basically being on the list of people. I mean, anybody can do this. There's a little button up at the top that's I don't know actually where it is on this thing. It used to be here somewhere. You could add yourself to basically be informed. The issue is that the withdrawn document is a duplicate of the proposed rule, and I think this is what's been going on for the last several weeks. They've been posting these things up, and it is supposedly a duplicate of the 322-0001 docket ruling, which is basically being transferred and posted to the rule document and then withdrew it. So we're not sure exactly what or why that's happening, but it's happening on kind of a regular basis. So that is a genuine concern as far as we have, we need to keep on top of that. But the Waters of the United States rule has not been withdrawn. As a matter of fact, let's just go double check what's going on with the Waters of the United States today. And we are at 223,214 comments and 15,316 still posted. So, less than, 10% have actually been posted. So it's a lot, but it is still alive and well. One of the things that you can do on this, let me just see if I can find we want the docket, not the, we want the get out of here, docket documents. And you can see there's two proposed rules, and that's another duplicate, this draft, just like the other one. So this was withdrawn. Last time, if you click this one, they now have the same idea that it was mistakenly transferred, whatever. For the longest time, it didn't say. And I think we were stirring up some trouble there by saying, what went on here? Could you please tell us? Because it just said reason withdrawn, nothing. And it didn't say. So same thing. So they've done it at least twice. But we can go back to this and you'll see that, the docket's still here. That's the proposed rule, closed for comments. And again, the word on the street, sort of, kind of, is that maybe, in the next few weeks, probably June, July, more likely, that we'll see that. So that is what's going on. So we're still trying to figure out what the current framework means in real sites, as George had just brought up. Definitely some issues about some older definitions. That the idea basically is, in the olden days, if you had a wetland, regardless of whether or not it was a big wetland or not, or connected to anything, if it crossed the state line, automatically it was considered a Waters of the United States, and that was the standard for many, many years. So I can definitely see why he would be concerned about that. The issue is that as we go through the update, they had to find a way to kind of cleave that out. So they put that in exceptions or exemptions rather. And I believe that's still in the exemption. So that's a complicated thing. Just because it crosses a state boundary doesn't necessarily mean it's a WOTUS, but that is a kind of a confusing concept. The idea behind all of this, and it really, when you get down to it, if you really want to push on this, what actually makes something a WOTUS, regardless of this connectivity issue, is that it has to have an economic impact on the downstream waters, or the waters overall, and has a connection. That gives the federal government the right to have anything to say about it. So to that end, if it doesn't, it doesn't. Well, I guess the idea was way back when that if a wetland crossed state boundaries, that you could affect some other state's interstate or foreign commerce, and that was under the Commerce Clause. So that was where they were bringing the jurisdiction. But that's a little harder to do with a wetland, a little easier to do with a lake or river, but a little harder to do with a wetland. So that is an issue. But while the Army and the EPA are still trying to figure all this out and go through these zillions of questions, and we were no slackers in dealing with that, we're basically still trying to focus on the idea of a continuous surface connection between a wetland and a relatively permanent water. So right now, you need to be careful of the headlines. If you recall, last week we talked a little bit about one of the Corps reps talking about the fact that the Corps was going out of the wetland business entirely, and that was really kind of spoken out of turn and really kind of not representing anything other than just kind of a flippant comment. And you have to be careful when, the media is in the room and they pick that up and it goes forward. Let me get that out of here too. So the issue there is that, you have to really be careful with, some of this stuff, and the major media is not very helpful on this at all. We've been trying to follow some of the stories. Greenwire has actually been kind of the one you unfortunately if you don't have a subscription to it, it's extremely expensive, but it is a good publication. But they do have a fair amount of teaser data or teaser information on their website, and that's sometimes all you really need. Is at least, is there something going on? and that's probably good enough. But that's the issue there. So again, our phone number is 919-297-2540, 2540. And if you have any questions, this is a good opportunity to call in. So we'd love to hear from you. I am going to move on to the next topic, which is, let me get over here to this one and fade over. Sorry if I'm talking while I'm doing this. The drought. The drought is kind of a big deal. It deserves a lot more attention right now. I sometimes, it's kind of funny because we do a lot of work. We actually just finished a class in wetland design this past week. We pushed the class, this program to Fridays, largely because I was in class all week, and I was kind of thinking, Friday's actually not a bad time to do this. So I'd actually be curious to see if you guys have any comments on that, if there's a better day of the week, if you're listening to this, while you're kind of trying to get stuff done for the end of the day or whatever. We can move this around a little bit. So we're trying to find out what's best. So definitely let us know. You can always send us an email and tell us. But with the drought, the issue basically that is needing a little more attention right now is the drought and watershed management. Right now, I'm in North Carolina, and we are on a mandatory water restrictions. It's a little bit hard to necessarily enforce some of these water restrictions because of the nature of how our state is broken up into many municipalities, which a lot of municipalities are, but or states are, but it's really up to the municipalities to manage this, sort of like a 1 day a week watering thing on, if you're an odd address. So it's like every other week you can water your lawn, that kind of stuff. But the issue is it's a very big deal. And the problem I see for this year, I've been using tea leaves lately to do my weather forecasting. And I am of the personal opinion that we are going to be in for a doozy of a drought this year. It's going to be tough. The last big one that we had in North Carolina was in 2007-8 era, and that was bad. It was very bad. Our water supply reservoirs were going dry, and it was a big issue. The bigger problem we have in going around this time is it was actually kind of funny. The 2007-2008 also corresponds with what people like to mentioned in the real estate market is the big short years. And the big short years were all about the fact that, they were buying properties that were, undervalued or, basically in receivership, and they were selling them for pennies on the dollar. And, there's the good paper and bad paper and all that kind of stuff. North Carolina never really experienced that real estate bubble where, you buy a house, on Monday and it's worth $100,000. On Tuesday, it's worth $300,000. And, Thursday, it's worth, $400,000, something like that. We didn't really have that bubble like you had, like in Florida was a good example, in California and some of the states like that where the prices just went crazy. Well, we're making up for lost time here in North Carolina, and we now have a really nice bubble that is, nervously, everyone's worried about popping because the real estate prices are extremely inflated, largely because we have a huge number of people moving in. Due to various reasons across the country, specifically on the West Coast, we're getting a lot of people on the West Coast moving in for our tech sector. And our tech sector is alive and well and doing great. And it is bringing lots and lots of jobs here. Well, the problem is that those folks all want to drink water and flush the toilet every day. And we have a finite amount of water. And it's, we have a lot more in North Carolina than we do let's say in Central Texas, but at least, actually Central Texas might be better off than we are right now. But we are in an area where basically, I think this red here, let me just point to the scale here. I believe the red is extreme drought, so D3. And we even, now in the Georgia, South Georgia, they're into, exceptional drought. So we're at level 3. And this is more or less kind of the Raleigh area here. This is a heavily populated Raleigh, Greensboro area. Charlotte's more closer to down here. So there's still an extreme drought, but we are in exceptional drought we're in extreme drought. The exceptional drought's down here. The rest of the state is in severe drought. So it's a big issue, and it's as much a water supply issue as it is anything else. That's probably the biggest issue. Now, for wetlands purposes, this causes a whole bunch of problems because now when we're doing our wetland delineations, we are dealing with extreme dry conditions. And what do we do? What is the solution there? And trying to find, basically a connection, physical connection, is it there or not? We're now having to extrapolate from that. And this is one of those challenges that we have as delineators, dealing with what do we do when there is let me switch over here, when there is a drought. How do we actually deal with the drought and the conditions to verify we have wetlands? They say, are your normal conditions, or normal weather present? I forget exactly what the data form says, but it's basically I think it's climate conditions typical for this time of year or something like that. And the answer right now is no, absolutely not. The climate conditions are terrible. And, it's very easy to walk past a wetland that is, would normally be easy to spot because things are drying up or just not doing well. Probably more the issue is, what do you do about those connections that you're trying to make? Are those relatively permanent connections, and are they, indistinguishable from the navigable waterway? Well, what happens when the navigable waterway is, 4 feet or 5 feet below its normal flow? So this is getting back to ordinary high watermark identification, and also spending a lot of time with the hydrology indicators. The hydrology indicators are a big part of this. And how do we find, the actual, is this wetland hydrology? And then is this wetland hydrology extending into basically the ordinary high water mark of the traditional navigable waterway, or what I kind of the anchor waters, the waters of the United States stuff. So we're having to do some of that. And this was one of the questions I had actually asked of the Corps in the public comment period about, can we use oxidized rhizospheres for a connection? And if that is the case, that would be a great case to move across, because even in a drought, they're not going to look great, but they are there. And we do have oxidized rhizospheres throughout these systems. So we are doing, we can do that. So, you dig your hole, you find you find your hydric soil, and, you're looking for those rhizospheres. And even if the soil is no longer gray, because some of these soils can be highly reactive, and, it's been dry enough that those soils could turn, especially if you're dealing with a soil that's like 1 chroma difference, where it's a 3 versus a 2, and, a little bit of drought, and now it's a 3, but those rhizospheres will persist. Use those rhizospheres to connect to the ordinary high water mark. Then you have a waters of the United States connection. That's the question I've asked. I don't have an answer to that. Can we do that? That's kind of what I do anyway now, but, don't tell anyone. No, we do. But that's the idea, that we use the hydrology indicators to get us across into other areas. So that's a big deal. So timing on this, and basically worrying about, do we have a false sense of it's not a waters of the United States? That's going to be definitely a concern. Are there, waters of the United States being missed because of the drought, and and it's the connection issues. I don't think there's much of an issue in identifying that the site is or isn't a wetland. The other indicators, water stained leaves and, drift lines, drift deposits, those sort of things would probably persist. You're obviously probably not going to find aquatic fauna, or maybe even not aquatic plants, but you'll find those other things. So that's a big part of it. And that can be a little bit more reliable on that. So we'll go with that. So basically that leaves kind of us into another frustration that we're dealing with at the same time. So let me jump onto climate data issues. But before I do, if there's anybody's got any questions about any of this stuff, give us a shout. 919-297-2540. Love to hear from you. So 297-297-2540. And let me jump over to this next issue here, which is this problem, which is we have some problems with NOAA and NRCS. And the problem is, I don't know that they have the budget they used to have. And that seems to be the trend. In the research I did on this, we've got a lot of challenges. If you use something like the APT tool, and you use there's actually a program called WetBud, which we absolutely love for wetland design. If you use any of that stuff, it is dependent upon the NOAA's data. And now we have this National Center for Environmental Information, which is a new kind of setup under NOAA. Actually, the rumor that I've heard is they're going to start charging for this data. But the idea is that we used to get what's known as GSOD, which was the Global Service Observations of the Day. Well, basically that ended last August, and they're not updating that. We still want to get the Global Historical Climate, I can't even say these words anymore, Global Historic Climatology Network, hourly data. What we're looking for is hourly data for surface observation. So this is going to be the rainfall, this is going to be the temperature, the humidity, all that stuff. We use this, the rainfall data for the APT tool, the antecedent precipitation tool, and we need access to this. Well, APT has been down periodically over the last several weeks because of these operating service disruptions. This is the other source you can go to. This is the Global Surface Observation of the Day, and you can do data search. Through this, you have to use an interface to do this now, and it's gotten a little bit complicated. I've actually been in contact with if you guys use WetBud for your wetland designs, which I highly recommend you do. You're gonna, if you are not in a area where the WetBud people have already preloaded their station data, so this is going to be kind of east of the Mississippi folks, you're probably okay because there's enough station data preloaded with the software package. But we had a group from Oklahoma in class this week, and Oklahoma is actually an interesting state. You have, pretty much, a huge range in ecologies, including extremely wet and extremely dry. So it is an interesting issue, but unfortunately, nothing preloaded. And we spent a fair amount of time trying to get the WetBud to work with the data, basically downloading the data directly from the NOAA stations, and lo and behold, could not find it, which was extremely irritating. So we did find the data. They were actually able to get some state data, and there is a way, if you're, again, I'm not meaning to make this a WetBud conversation, but if you've used WetBud, there is a way to manually upload data from Excel spreadsheets, and you can take the data from wherever and put it in and create your own data station, which is great, which is what we did, or they did, actually. So it is an issue, but it is something to be aware of. We are trying to stay aware of what's going on with this water data, because I believe as we get more and more into the Waters of the United States issues, we're going to have more and more issues with dealing with the government data sets and access to the government data sets. And there literally has been discussion about this is going to be something, a subscription you're going to have to pay into or whatever, which, I mean, if you're using it professionally, fine. I mean, I do kind of question what am I paying my taxes for, but the bottom line is that we do want the data and we're going to use it for a professional purpose. So it is an issue. The other one is the NRCS WETS data site. The WETS is live and it is working. And actually, let me just pull up a couple things here. I don't think that was the one. Yeah. The APT tool is been updated, and this is something whenever they update and move this NOAA data and the NRCS data, they have to update the tools. And this was as of November, so this is actually after the GSOD data was shut down. So I think this is using the right tools. The problem is the sites keep going down, but you basically want to pay attention to this. If you're using APT and you've downloaded it, a year or two ago, and it was working great, and now it doesn't work. Well, the reason is because they've changed the URLs of that, so it's hard coded into the programming. So we need to update this thing and update it on a regular basis. So the latest release is this one. I'll pull over here. It's just 3.08 was the latest release, which is actually September 30th, and this is the latest and greatest. The Corps does do a pretty good job of keeping up with this, so you're able to find the latest and greatest, and you just you scroll down here and upload or download WetBud as a zip file, and you can install it. And that is the latest and greatest as of today in April of 2026. So we've got that to work with. So those are some notes on that. Now I do want to transition over. If, again, anybody have any questions? Well, I'd love to hear from you. So on, 919-297-2540. So please call in. Let me go over here. Fade in here. All right, I'm back. Here I am. The other thing that we're looking at is wetland careers. I had mentioned that we were going to talk a little bit about wetland careers, and This is pretty important. A few minutes on wetland careers. It's an interesting job market phenomenon. We have two ways we can see metrics on the job market. One is we get a lot of people signing up for our wetland delineation classes and our basic trainings and things like that. The other is we also watch the activity, especially for the online people who are taking the class, is to whether they're doing their homework or not. And it's always interesting to see when the homework drops off. We may have lots of people sign up for the class, but not working. Well, they are working. They're working in the field. And so we have seen the last couple of weeks just, both on the basically people sign up for new classes and also the homework, it's really dropped off. And from what I hear in the professional world is they are slammed with work. So they're trying to get stuff done. It's kind of a funny time because what's going on right now is we have a number of companies. I think I counted about almost 900 open positions across the country that we just did a quick review on. And, these are mid-level scientist jobs, some entry-level, more mid-level, to be honest with you. That seemed to be the biggest one, a couple years experience as opposed to, entry-level. And it's interesting because what we're seeing kind of as a trend is that companies are hiring less entry-level people and either trying to recruit from other companies, the mid-level people, or bringing them on from other entities. But that seems to be the biggest issue right now is that there's a lot more mid-level jobs, which are a little higher paying, which is good. But the job market does look pretty good. I think there's been a little reticence right now in some of the job markets because we're basically let's make do with what we have is sort of what we're hearing from some of our companies. I'd love to hear from you about that. And if you're hiring right now and you want to get a plug-in for a job, give us a call. So we'll get your job out there. But we're basically looking for, some idea of what the job market is looking like. So I definitely would like to hear from some of you guys if you are, and you can do this offline, just shoot us an email and tell us, if you're looking for somebody. We'll probably make that a feature in the show as we move on. But basically, look, if you're looking for the ideas of wetlands is a viable career, more so in the private sector than the government sector, though there are some government jobs out there. But there's a lot of hiring freezes, especially at the federal level, but a fair amount at the state and local level. We've seen a lot of those as well. So it is a good time to be in this business, and that helps quite a bit. And again, if you're trying to break into wetlands, if you have any questions now, it'd be a great time to call. So again, it's 919-297-2540. And we're going to kind of do just a couple more things. We'll be wrapping up in a short bit here, but I've got a couple other things. If you're dealing with these issues regularly, let me just switch over here right quick to another screen. And I want to just to do a quick shameless plug. We have a regulatory intelligence subscription we're doing. This is a monthly thing where we do it a little more detail. It does give you the opportunity to watch it anytime you want. So it's asynchronous, but it is detailed and a little more organized than this. This is just kind of a high level view. We're going to go to some deep stuff on this one. And I'm trying to remember what we did this month. We're coming up in May. But we have a little sample here and what you get, so forth, knowledge and things like that. So it's a subscription in addition to our regular classes that we have. Definitely want to visit swampschool.org. I guess that's if you're watching us here, you can watch our show, and here's our call in. But our classes are filling up quite nicely for the spring. So we definitely, if you're interested in taking one of our classes, don't hesitate to sign up because we definitely want to see you there. And one last thing on that is we decided to put some stuff out for free. And we thought long and hard about this. We've been teaching a lot of this stuff over the years and little snippets here and there. People ask questions. So we sat down and we're like, what kind of the questions that we typically get from students? And we broke these up into shorts, and you can see scrolling down here a little bit. This is our YouTube channel. And we have, who's qualified? What is the innocent landowner defense? What makes it endangered? These are all different ones, and there's bunches of them under here. So we've got stuff on basic wetlands. We have stuff on the phase ones, all this kind of stuff. We even get into the ecology stuff. And I should mention there's a macro class we're doing next month, which is very popular, where we're actually doing macroinvertebrates, and we're going out and sampling on that. The instructor that teaches that class is also the one that does it for the state certification that the state employees need. So Greg is a great teacher for macroinvertebrates. So we do have that. But we do also get into some of that stuff here. So this is a good place to get all that. And we have some fun stuff. We did a bunch of storybooks for kids. So if you got some kids that at home that want to watch basically hear a story read to them, we put a lot of effort into that. Some swampy stories, if you will, on that. So it's a lot of fun. But we've got a lot of stuff in there. So, but these shorts are great. They're basically environmental science in 60 seconds, and we're getting a lot of views on them. You can see some of them we just posted recently, but this one alone, why engineers need environmental scientists. I'm sorry, I'm laughing. 162 views. That's one of our better ones. I'm not sure if the engineers are watching it or the environmental scientists are watching it, but that's kind of makes me laugh. But anyway, that's a bunch of stuff there. So we've got a lot of them. We've got a new person on board our team, Chloe, who is an absolute amazing in putting this stuff together. She's doing a great job on this. They're absolutely beautiful. So they're fun to watch, and they're meant to be quick. So you can just pop it in as you're driving down the road, or listening, just want to listen to it in your office. But they're 60-second, bunny theater sort of stuff. They're really short, and they cover a lot of stuff. So that is the bulk of it. So we will probably end it here, and I want to thank you for your attention in the class. It was definitely a lot of fun getting this thing together. Let me flip back over here. And we are very excited to have you guys on here, and we'd really like to, get some questions out there. So I know we're just getting started here. We're going to try to do this on a weekly basis, and that's our goal, to do this every week for a half an hour. If we run a little bit more than that, that's great. That's basically going to be a function of getting callers in here to call. So if you want to call in and ask some questions and get a conversation going, I really appreciate George calling in. He's a great friend to the Swamp School for many, many years, and I appreciate his insight into this. So with that, I will wish you well. I hope that you have a great weekend, and we will see you next week.